have 3 on Zoom and 3 in the room, so we do have 6. So we're just hand out some documents, so your call when you're ready.
She's on mute right now.
We can't see auditorium staff. Do you have a camera on in there?
It's on the TCV TV link, so they'll advance it for us.
Okay, last time we could see you under auditorium staff.
Yeah, you should in just a minute be able to see us.
Okay. Did we hear from anybody else about not being here or attending tonight?
In the auditorium, we have Commissioner Willie just walked in. We have Commissioner Treese, Commissioner Scouten, and myself, Chair Harrington, Commissioner Harrington.
Okay. But as far as the other community members?
That's it for here. So we have Bruce online, Dan online, and yourself online.
Right. Okay. All right. And we're streaming on YouTube?
Not yet.
What are they waiting for?
All right, so Sarah, you can start us and then they'll chime in.
Okay, but should we start if we're not online?
They're waiting
For the-
for us, apparently, to get going. So start us off and they'll somehow magically start the feed.
Okay. All right. I call this meeting to order of the North Bethany Service Districts for roads.
Can you see us?
Yes. There you
Terrific.
are. Okay, now we have the auditorium on. Well, I can at least see you. We can see everybody in the hall. There we go. Okay. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Sarah Beachy. I'm the chair of the North Bethany Service District for Roads. Welcome, everybody. Do we have any idea how many people are, if anyone's watching online?
Yes, Chair Beachy, we have 6 people online via Zoom and then the 6 on YouTube.
Wonderful. Well, welcome. Our agenda for the night, we have the district budget overview.
So is someone presenting the district budget overview? We have a slide set.
Presentation.
Here we are.
Are we on now? Oh, yep. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Beachy and Budget Committee members. We just have a couple of slides for tonight that we'll run through fairly quickly, and then we'll have some time for questions. I also wanted to make sure to point out that Jack Lang had forwarded some additional supplemental information over the weekend to you that in response to our discussion that we had at our previous meeting on May 12th. So hopefully you had a chance to look at that, and certainly happy to answer any questions about that material as well. So I guess we just dive on in. So next slide, please. One more. Thank you. So this was something that was included in the supplemental materials. I thought it was just helpful to sort of illustrate the function of the North Bethany County Service District for Roads fund, the actual fund itself. So it is supported by a property tax revenue, the 25 cents per thousand of assessed value, or $1.25, I should say, per thousand of assessed value. So that's a direct source of revenue into the fund. And then we also use the fund as something of a holding account that we use to transfer revenues from other funding sources into that fund. And then we actually house our projects there. And so project expenditures are coming out of the North Bethany Service District for Roads fund balance. So as you look at if we go on to the next slide. So as we look at the next slide, this just depicts our proposed budget for the upcoming year. So there's an existing fund balance of just under $1.5 million in the fund. We're anticipating about $809,000 in revenues. That's the property tax revenue primarily and some interest funds. We have then the remainder of the funding for the almost $9.4 million is revenues transferred from the North Bethany System Development Charge Fund and the Transportation Development Tax Fund. And then for expenditures, the way we budget, we show everything, both project expenditures and carry forward balances, if you will, are shown as expenditures in the budget. So the total expenditures are $10.6 million in materials and supplies. That's our project expenditures plus contingency. And then we have a couple of other smaller charges that total up to $10.8 million is the total proposed budget amount, both the revenues and the expenditures. And then on the last slide, just to reiterate the recommendation from staff that's incorporated in the budget that you have before you is that we're continuing essentially a fairly conservative pay-as-you-go approach. There is remaining uncertainty about housing volume, which has impacts on both property tax revenues potentially going forward, as well as collection of system development charge revenues and transportation development tax revenues. We will continue to monitor the status of various developments and their ability to help complete some of the infrastructure that was identified in the original North Bethany Transportation Funding Strategy. This coming budget year, we do anticipate improvements on Springville Road from Kaiser Road to Joss, starting construction. And then our recommendation in the budget this year was an additional $900,000 that will help fund the design of what we're calling Springville Phase 4, and that's the segment from Joss to the PCC entrance. And then we would anticipate coming back next year with a recommendation as to potential future project allocation based on the amount of revenues that are in the fund at that time. That's my very quick overview, and I'm happy to try to answer any questions that you might have.
Next slide.
Did I hear, is there a question?
No, I was just asking them to move to the next slide for you.
Oh, okay. Do we have any,
Go ahead, Chair Bucci.
do we have any questions from the committee?
It doesn't look like we have any in the room here.
Okay,
Not for today, for me.
okay. Mr. Young?
Nothing for me. Nothing for me.
Okay.
We covered it real well last meeting.
Yep, very good. Okay, I don't have any either. What about from the public?
Thank you, Chair Beachy. We have received none from the county administration.
Were we able to put anything online or has anything come in?
Nothing has come into the county administration mailbox or the clerk's office box. Anything for you, Jack, in the last hours?
We actually did receive community feedback regarding the advertisement of this budget hearings as well as budget committee meetings. And then we actually did a social media campaign in partnership with the county's communications team as well as the county's community engagement team. So all of this public hearings today that we have sent out social media posts in terms of engaging with the public. So that is the only other comment that we have received regarding North Bethany, but that really does apply to other county budget meetings as well.
Okay.
And we do have a 6 o'clock time certain for public testimony. So it's while we don't have anybody sign up, we any public could possibly show up at that time, counting on the time certain, so we can actually move to an intermission if the budget committee wishes, and then come back at 6 o'clock to see if there's any public testimony shows up.
Okay, that sounds good with me. Any objections?
No,
Nope. Looks like we're all set here in the room with that.
Okay, so we will take an intermission until 6 p.m. to come back for public testimony.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Back.
right, 6 o'clock, Chair Beachy, you're free to reconvene the meeting.
At 6 p.m., it is time for public testimony. Do we have any public testimony in the auditorium?
Thank you, Chair Beachy. Is anyone that is online in Zoom, if you have a question for this North Bethany District for Roads, please raise your hand, and we'll just give it a second and see if anyone has any questions. Right, Madam Chair, I am seeing no questions.
Okay. And none in the auditorium?
Is there anyone in the auditorium that wishes to testify on behalf of this North Bethany Community Service District for Roads? There's no one here, ma'am.
Okay. All right, we shall move on our agenda. Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the budget for North Bethany County Service District for Roads as proposed, levying the permanent property tax rate of 1.25 per $1,000 of assessed value?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second?
Thank you. All right, can we have you can say aye to approve the measure?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any nays? Do we need to call out people because we're virtual?
No, you don't need to do a roll call. We didn't have any nays, so the motion passed unanimously, 6-0, 7-0.
7-0.
Yes.
Great, the motion passes. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, staff and all committee members.
Thank you, Sarah.
All right, and the committee is free for any further discussions or adjourn the meeting.
I just wanted, I would just like to thank Chair Beatty and also to community members, Mr. Young and Mr. Reed, for serving on this budget committee. And thank you for the work that you put in, having the subcommittee meeting in the generally the springtime or wintertime to prepare materials for this budget committee to consider. Thank you.
Great. Any other comments, questions? Okay. Then the board will reconvene a public hearing at 10 a.m. to consider the full budget adoption on June 16th at 10 a.m. in the Charles Cameron Public Services Auditorium in Hillsborough. Public testimony is welcome. And we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thought we were going to have a, oh yeah, it's close to.
And Chair Mills, you have a button on the microphone, so you can use that to turn it on.
Okay, it's 6:30. Welcome to the Enhanced
my
Sheriff
order.
Patrol District Urban Road Maintenance District Budget Hearing for May 27th, 2020 at 6:30. I am the chair, Anthony Mills. I would like to have everybody introduce themselves just for the record. And could we start with Melissa, please?
Yes. Hi, Melissa Laird.
Pam Treese, Commissioner, District 2.
Dick Scouten, County Commissioner for the ABC District, Aloha Beaverton and Cooper Mountain.
Roy Rogers, District 3. Stephen Bayer, excuse me, Stephen Barron, Board Member.
Catherine Harrington, at-large Commission Chair.
Jerry Willie, County Commissioner, District 4.
Ray Eck, ERMDEC Chair.
Great, thank you. And I believe that Daniel Hauser is the only person on the committee who's not currently with us. He may join us telephonically soon. So let's start with the ESPD budget overview.
One question. I wanted to make this for the record, if possible, and it would probably be directed to Catherine, Chair. The coronavirus money that was given to the county, it may not be here yet, of about 104,000 plus.
104.66 million.
664 million. For all the four of the different budgets, I take it that none of this money will be infused into any of these particular budgets. I just would make it for the record.
The U.S. Treasury has defined that, Congress defined that those dollars have to be used for COVID-19 response. They cannot be used to backfill lost revenue. So the county administrator convened an internal work group to try and size up Washington County's cost for the COVID response as well as recovery. Congress defined that these dollars are available between March 1st, for expenditures between March 1st and the end of December. And so the work group has just framed up a proposal and will be taking that to the Board of Commissioners at their work session next Tuesday. A couple of weeks ago, on Tuesday, May 12th, the Board of Commissioners authorized that a draft set of goals and principles should be released publicly, and that was done.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Sheriff. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Mills. Good evening, committee members. I'm Sheriff Pat Garrett. If I could have the slide, please.
Oh, could I interrupt you for 1 second? I just want to announce that Daniel Hauser has joined us. So thank you. Welcome, Daniel. Go ahead, Sheriff.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry I was caught in the participant world and didn't get the chance to join as a panelist for a few minutes. So I appreciate it, and I'm glad to be here.
Is your sidekick joining us tonight?
What's that?
Is your sidekick joining you tonight?
That depends on how long his nap lasts as these things go, but I'll let him know you're thinking of him.
Okay, we are.
Thank you. Could I have the slide, please? While we're getting this slide up for ESPD, I just want to take a moment as the sheriff to acknowledge the death of George Floyd 2 nights ago. Like many of you, I've seen the video and it is horrific. While Minneapolis is far away, we recognize that the anger, the mistrust, the frustration is felt locally, particularly by our African American community. We just have to acknowledge that. And that calls on us to redouble our efforts to ensure that our practices, protocols, policy, leadership, checks and balances ensure to the very best of our ability professional, dependable, supportive services that respect constitutional rights, civil rights, and the sanctity of life. And so I honor George Floyd and recognize his horrific passing, and I am sure that justice will find its way in this matter.
Thank you.
You'll recall when we were last together, this slide, really, the district is about 33 years old. It's been our privilege to provide urban level policing services to the some 240,000 residents. Slide, please. This slide shows how the Sheriff's Office funding is distributed across our organization, and it puts the ESPD budget into some perspective relative to our entire patrol budget, representing about 58% of our entire patrol budget. Not too surprising, given the size of the district. This is a review, so I won't delve too deeply. Slide, please. Here we covered our budget request, $32.9 million for this next fiscal year, which represents a 9.5% increase over the current year, or about $2.8 million. Our biggest cost drivers are personnel. That's up 8.4%. That represents, this budget reflects an increase of population add, several deputies for population adds, 1 criminal record specialist, and then some cost increases for salaries, retirement costs, and health benefits. The other driver is capital outlay of 14.2%. And I want to note, after reviewing our vehicle request, after we met last time, I reduced our additional vehicle request from 7 to 5. I think that's appropriate. We work out of 3 offices, and we have some deputies with back, hip conditions. We've gone through the interactive process, and we need to have a specific type of vehicle available for their use so that it best supports themselves ergonomically. And then, as I said, we have a couple of really, really tall deputies. It just is important to support them ergonomically. And with that, I think that's the extent of my comments. Would love to take questions.
Are there any questions by any board members? Daniel, do you have any questions?
I just have a comment. It's nice to, a week later, to see that the Justice Levy passed by a pretty good number, actually, and that's a big relief for all of us.
Thank you, Commissioner. I was overjoyed by that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Could I clarify, all the money that goes into this budget for these districts is money that's taxed on the residents of the area, on homeowners and renters through?
That's correct,
Right.
Chair.
So getting back to Ray's question, other than people having a problem paying their property taxes, there shouldn't be any hits from COVID on the economy that affect the money that goes into this.
Great question. I draw on Mr. Lang's expertise to
You wouldn't
confirm.
have to tell the train to be quiet, I think.
My long understanding is that these are property taxes that are levied as a result of the permanent rate that was established after Measure 5 or 50. I can't remember which. And then the levy rate every 5 years, similar to the
Sure. But there's no other large general fund money that's being moved into here that might be impacted?
You are correct. There is none.
This is Celia Lindstrom with the County Administrative Office. If Jack were sitting here, he would tell you that we expect that property taxes will be relatively buffered from the COVID impact. There are state-level funds that are going to be much more impacted. Income tax, we're going to see affected much more quickly. So state-level cuts will be affected, but we expect property taxes to be relatively stable because, as the sheriff said, because of some previous measures on the books.
Are there any other questions or comments from the board at this time? Okay, well, thank you very much. Did you have anything else you wanted to say?
No, thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, so the next topic is the URMD budget overview. Oh, I guess we skipped over public questions. We will have a date or a time certain, but I don't see any public that have questions at this time. Again, at 7 p.m., we'll also have an opportunity for the public. So, Todd, why don't you
Good evening, Todd Watkins, Road Operations Manager for Land Use and Transportation. And tonight, for our budget request for the Urban Road Maintenance District is a total of $9.4 million. The bulk of that is continuing to go towards our Bike and Pedestrian Improvement Program. This is a great program that's been in place for many years now, and we are able to do some great things with sidewalk infills and bike and pedestrian facilities, which otherwise would not be constructed. These are projects which are bigger than a maintenance project, but not quite a capital project, and they've been extremely well received by the community. On the road maintenance side, we are planning to continue with our alternating season of paving and slurry seal, and this coming year will be a slurry seal season, and we will be budgeting about $750,000 for that program. And then we also do support some other efforts, the Neighborhood Streets Program, the ADA ramp program, and then other activities such as just routine maintenance that comes into the door through requests from citizens for things that are unpredicted or unknown at the time. And the next slide, I think, if we hit that one, is just a kind of a highlight of what we do with the ERM program. We use the term paving program kind of as our generic descriptor, although that does include the slurry seals, as I mentioned, which this year we'll be doing, the bike ped program, our ADA program. And then I do want to say that one of our big accolades is our asset management program when it comes to our pavement condition. We have an exceptional track record of having a high-performing pavement condition index, which is in large part the reason why we can do what we can with the bike and ped program. And so with that, I will end my testimony and staff report and open up any questions you might have.
Any members of the Budget Committee have any questions or comments? Yes.
Yeah, just quickly, Todd, you've got URMD safety improvements, pretty significant increase this year. What were some of those projects that you've got budgeted there?
Sure, and the reason why you see that increase, Commissioner, is because of the fact that these are, they're not large projects in the sense of the dollar amount. We have several that we do over the course of the years, and they take multiple seasons, 1 and 2 years plus. And so what happens is that if a particular project doesn't get completed in one fiscal year, we'll carry that money over. So that's what you're seeing there with that carryover, is those projects that are taking more than one season or one fiscal year to construct.
Daniel, did you have any questions or comments?
No, but thank you for creating this space.
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead, Ray.
On the projects that you have on the board so far coming into this year, how are we doing on those projects because of COVID-19 and so on and so forth?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ray. So fortunately, we've been able to continue work, consultants continuing to design, our project management teams are continuing to deliver the work, and we're actually seeing competitive prices on the construction side. So that's all encouraging to where we'll be able to stretch those dollars even further. So everything's moving forward on those projects.
So you're on schedule with everything?
Correct.
Getting at a better price.
Yes, yes, it's similar to what we saw in 2008 when the recession was hitting, that we did see some competitive prices then, and we are seeing that to some extent now with this.
Good.
That was pretty much my question. With less traffic on the roads, is anything gotten easier for you guys, or?
Yeah, that question has come up before, Anthony, as far as can we go out there and block the lanes now when there's not as much traffic? And it's not as easy as that sounds, part of it is because a lot of these projects are contracted and they're planned for the summer, and we aren't even ready to launch some of these. That's on the maintenance side and also the capital side, not just within ERMD. And so although it's great to have that opportunity, sometimes it just isn't possible, physically possible to do that.
Any other, yeah, go ahead, Melissa.
So the same COVID ID question we had earlier probably applies here with the same answer. There's very little impact. None at all.
As far as the revenue goes, or about the impact of the pandemic on our delivery of service?
The revenue.
Yeah, no, that's not. The revenue from ERMD is from the ERMD tax base.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll adjourn for 15 minutes, and then at 7, we have time certain for public and community organization testimony. So we'll adjourn for 15 minutes.
We do have 16 on Zoom, so we have improved by 9 from the first committee.
Let the numbers speak for themselves. Okay, we're reconvening the Sheriff Patrol District, Urban Road Maintenance District budget hearing agenda. We are on number 7, public and community organizational testimony, 7 p.m. time certain. We have received an email from.
It would appear the auditorium is muted again. I'm not hearing anything.
How about now? Can you hear us
Yes.
now? Okay, great.
Thank you.
I think that I will read this into testimony so that people can hear it. This is from Patrick O'Clair. Is there an appropriation for permanent traffic display speed indicators or other traffic speed mitigation devices in Shoals Country Estates, which is located in the lower section of Southwest Roshack Road between Southwest Barrows and Southwest Snapdragon Lane? Also, the River Terrace subdivision opened a connection to Shoals Country Estates at Southwest Luke Lane, which would warrant a 4-way stop sign. Are there items in the proposed budget? If there are not in the proposed budget, we would like you to consider an amendment to the proposed budget to add them in considering the amount of traffic and traffic speeds on Southwest Roshack Road. Sincerely, Patrick O'Clair, 16264 Southwest Kieran's Court, Tigard, Oregon. Is there anybody from the ERMD department that would like to speak to that? I'm not sure if this is even in that district, but if you have any comments, please identify yourself.
Thank you. I'm Stephen Roberts. I'm the Director of Land Use and Transportation. So there's a couple of issues here that I'll try to address. The first about the request for the traffic display speed indicators. So our elected board members will know we've come to them pre-COVID and talked a little bit about a possibility of expanding the Urban Road Maintenance District's funding for the Neighborhood Streets Program to also include certain roads that we would call residential collectors. So Roshack Road is an example. It's a predominantly residential street, but it's designated as a collector in our transportation system plan. The way that ERMD is currently structured, those roads are not eligible for the traffic calming under the Neighborhood Street Program criteria. So we've had a discussion with the Urban Road Maintenance District Advisory Committee, which Ray and I think Melissa are on, and received generally good feedback there. We've talked with our board about it, and then COVID happened and we have not been able to get back to that issue. So the answer to the first question, long answer, the short answer is that no, there is not money in the budget at this time that reflects that potential expansion of the Neighborhood Street Program, because at this point we don't have the authorization from our board to do those expenditures. If we were successful in obtaining that, then there are opportunities for us to come back and request budget amendments, and certainly we could always kick the program off with a funding allocation in the upcoming budget year as well. Any questions on that before I? Okay.
If I might.
Yes.
Be clear, are there revenues that could be appropriated for this either now or through a budget amendment or a supplemental budget?
Yes, we have a fund balance that's part of this current budget, and so we certainly could allocate some of that unallocated fund balance into a different program. Yep. Okay. And then the second question about the stop sign, that's we don't get down to that level of detail in our budget in terms of allocating dollars specifically for specific sign locations, but we do have a program where any resident can contact us if they have a request for traffic signage or traffic control. We can evaluate that request, and if it meets the warrants for, in this case, a 4-way stop sign, then that's something that we can work into it. So we have programmatic allocations, actually in a different budget, but we do have programmatic allocation that we could use for minor improvements like that.
Would you consider this email a request to start that process, or do we need Mr. O'Clair to follow up with something?
Yeah, I'll forward this on to it's our traffic engineering section, so I'll forward this on and make sure that they have it. Yep. Thank you.
I just want to say, as a member of the committee, I think that at this point, it's too late to try to change the budget to accommodate this. I think that it should be investigated, but just because somebody brings something, to a budget committee at this point, it's usually too late. But for the sake of safety, I would hope that, this is looked at and communicated to Mr. Eau Claire. Did you have anything else that you wanted to say? I didn't want to.
No, I think that was it if there were no other questions.
Did any of the current members here? Yeah, please.
Back to the collector to the neighborhood. I hope that ERMDEC can get back on page with that particular program, because I think that was a great way to go here coming up in the future.
Great. Yeah.
And the last thing, I was on that intersection at Lute here last weekend, and we had quite a few cars there on the weekend. It was on a Saturday. And so people were jockeying to go across.
Okay. Great. All right.
You might want to stay there just in case we have some questions from online. Do we have any online questions that have come in?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have not received any in official writing, but is anyone on Zoom? Does anyone please use the raise your hand function if you have a question? We'll give you just a moment to give the public a chance. All right, seeing none, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any more comments or questions from members of the Budget Committee, or any other comments that anybody would like to make at this point? Seeing none. Okay, thank you very much. So we are now at the Budget Committee action time. We have some motions to consider. Mr. CFO, I've been on other budget committees, and when we've done this, we've done each motion separately.
Correct. You have 2 slides.
Would you like to, well, but for the Enhanced Sheriff Patrol District, on other committees, we would have 3 motions. I believe when I sat in earlier at the previous budget committee, you had 2 that were wrapped up. How would you like that done tonight for these? I understand that ERMD has to be separate from the Sheriff's Department.
Correct.
Do you want all 3 of these on page 26 to be done at one time?
Yes, and that would be fine. That's what we did last year, and that's being in the budget committee's procedures.
Okay.
Unless the budget committee has another preference, obviously it's your decision as a committee. So.
First of all, is everybody okay of doing all 3 at once? Okay. Is there anybody who would like to make a motion to approve what's on page 26?
I so move.
Okay,
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, thank you very much. The second one is page 27 to approve the Urban Road Maintenance District. Do I have a motion for that?
So moved.
It's been moved.
Second.
I have 2 seconds. Any further discussion before we vote? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, well, thank you very much for everybody's service. We have a lot of new members of the board this year. Thank you very much for coming on board and attending. We appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. We are adjourned at 7:09. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh. Next steps, June 16th, 2020, there's a board to convene a public hearing at 10 a.m. at the board meeting to consider the budget adoption. The location is the Charles D. Cameron Building here, 155 North First Avenue, Hillsborough, and public testimony is welcome at that time.
And that meeting as well will have Zoom capability.
There will be Zoom capability for people who cannot attend in person. Thank you.
Thank you for being chair.
Well done, Anthony.
Yes, thanks, Chair, and thanks everyone for letting me to continue to participate remotely. It's been my pleasure.
Stay healthy. Thank you. Okay, it's 7:30. So I'll call the Budget Committee meeting, budget hearing for Washington County and the Service District Lighting Number 1 to order. We'll start by having our 2 Budget Committee members who are attending through virtual means just announce themselves for us. Go ahead, Jennifer and Karen.
Hey, good evening. This is Jennifer Burkhart, present.
And do we have Karen over as a panelist?
Yes, we do. Karen, can you hear us? Do you hear us, Karen?
I can hear you.
Oh, wonderful. Great. Welcome, Karen. And
Thank you.
here in the room, Commissioner Treese, do you want to just go around the table,
Yes.
please?
Commissioner Pam Treese, District 2.
Washington County Commissioner Dick Scouten for the Lower Beaverton Cooper Mountain area.
Roy Rogers, Commissioner, District 3.
Jerry Willie, Commissioner, District 4.
And Catherine Harrington, Chair at Large. So we'll go to the next slide, please. This is the committee. We have 3 lay members who are not attending tonight and our agenda for this evening. So we'll jump right into it. The county budget overview with our Assistant County Administrator, Sia Lindstrom. Sia, take it away.
Thank you. Good evening. I have the pleasure of walking you through briefly the budget message that Steve and I delivered to you a couple of weeks ago. And this is for our viewing audience, just a reminder of some of the major themes from the county administrator's budget message. First, I want to briefly comment on the budget process this year. As you can imagine, it takes many months to put together a $1.4 billion budget. This year, departments turned in their requested budgets the end of February. Now, you all may remember the end of February. So February 28th is when departments turned in their requested budgets. February 28th was also the day we had our first COVID case here in Washington County. It was an interesting time. I say that just to let you know that this budget proposal was put together in an unprecedented time of flux and change. So we're beginning to see and understand the early fiscal impacts of COVID-19, of course, but the true impacts over time are still unfolding. So given that, you will not be surprised to see the 3 major themes coming out of the county administrator's budget message. 1, continuity and response of essential services. 2nd, caution for the future. And 3, the board's pre-pandemic priorities. And I'm going to walk through all 3 of these briefly. Next slide, please. So continuity of operations. This is from 2 perspectives. First is the continuity of our essential functions, which includes everything from animal control to libraries to affordable housing and homelessness to elections, as we saw last week. Second, the vital functions related to our emergency response. That includes everything from public health and the Emergency Operations Center, our work on reopening while protecting the public's health, and our burgeoning efforts to support our community's economic recovery. All of those done with our continuous focus with an equity lens with all we do. Next slide, please. So a couple of weeks ago, we also talked about caution in several areas. As I mentioned earlier, this budget was put together in a time of uncertainty as COVID was just starting to emerge. We fully expect that a review of the budget will be necessary in the next 2 to 3 months as the financial and economic impacts of COVID unfold. And Steve shared that with you when he delivered his budget message 2 weeks ago. The county is also vulnerable to state cuts, as we mentioned a little earlier. I'll talk about that in more depth in the next slide. And finally, some good news to share. 2 weeks ago, we had continuation of the levies on our caution slide, and we now know with last week's election that both levies passed. Something we can finally share as good news. Yay. Next slide, please. So this is just a reminder. I also shared this slide with you 2 weeks ago. This is the caution on state funding. You'll remember that the big red swath in the middle of this are the shared services that we have with the state, and they span all of our functional areas. So while we expect our local property tax revenue to be somewhat buffered from early damage to the economy, state funding is much more exposed given its reliance on income tax, and that is all of the services listed in this, the red swath. So we'll continue to monitor state funding stability as economic impact of COVID becomes clearer. Next slide, please. Finally, just a reminder of our pre-pandemic priorities. And as I said 2 weeks ago, these priorities have not changed. As a matter of fact, COVID has actually served to spotlight the importance of these 4 priorities even more. First, diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI. The board adopted a comprehensive equity resolution earlier this year, and a reminder that the proposed budget includes the creation of a new Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement, along with 5 new staff positions. Economic development is second. Proposed budget includes the creation of a new economic development program and a new ECDEV program manager position. This function has become even more vitally important in the age of COVID. Third, affordable housing and homelessness. The county's commitment to increasing the supply of affordable housing countywide and addressing the impacts of homelessness is reflected in various funds throughout the proposed budget. We're already seeing the additional stressors placed on these services because of COVID, as the economic constraints put more people at risk of losing their homes. And fourth, transportation. The proposed budget includes funding for a robust capital improvement program with 94 projects totaling $125 million. So all 4 of these pre-pandemic priorities you will see woven through the proposed budget tonight. So that was a very quick overview of the budget message that we delivered 2 weeks ago for our viewing audience, just so that they have a sense of what we discussed. With that, I will turn it back over to Jack Liang for an overview of our functional budget.
Thank you, Sia. Next slide, please. And Budget Committee members, you have seen these numbers before, and for the benefit of the public, I will go over this briefly with you guys again. And our total appropriation for fiscal year 2021 is $1,366,124,744. And that includes both general fund and special fund, general fund being 23% of the mix and special funds being 77% of the mix. And then looking at our appropriations in different functional areas, general government has a 6%, public safety and justice has a 16%, land use and transportation is 9%, housing, health, and human services is 18%, culture, education, and recreation is 5%, and non-departmental is less than 1%. And then capital is 23%, and non-operating is 23%. This includes a total FTE of 2,229.58 for the entire county, and that is the total appropriation. Is there any questions for the totals? Okay, next slide, please. So the general fund appropriation is where most of the county's discretionary revenue, discretionary resources rests. And then you can see that our general fund total appropriation is $320,016,175, including 1,155.19 FTEs. And our total revenues mix is 38% taxes, and then 21% taxes dedicated to major street transportation improvement program and Washington County Co-op library services. And then 18% is departmental revenue, and the 23% are interfund and transfers. And then on the expenditure side, breaking down into different functional areas, is we have a general government at 23%, public safety and justice at 31%, land use and transportation at 1%, housing, health, and human services at 11%, culture, education, and recreation at 1%, non-departmental at 1%, and non-operating at 32%. So that is an overview of the general fund appropriation that is proposed for your consideration today. And do you have any questions?
Committee members, do you have any questions thus far?
Do we have any sense yet, speaking of another measure that passed past week, is the Metro Regional Wraparound Services for Affordable Housing levy? What impact might that have on our housing budgets?
Yeah, let's let Ruth Asuna come and speak to that.
Chair Harrington, members of the committee, we have begun discussions with Metro regarding the implementation of the supportive services measure, but this budget will not see any implications or any revenue from it. The first revenue that we're going to be seeing, it's going to be coming in April of 2021. That means between now and the end of the calendar year, December, that we have to put our local implementation strategy together and sign an intergovernmental agreement with Metro to be ready to receive the funds in April.
So we can take care of any budget structural needs through a supplemental budget as things are clearer to us in the future.
Okay. Has there been any, as a follow-up, has there been any reassessment on their end about what they might anticipate in terms of revenues, given the COVID that came into the picture somewhere between when this first launched and when this was passed, housing levy?
Chair Harrington, members of the committee, I can't answer that question tonight. I can go back and have a conversation with Metro. We are, like I said, we just began those conversations this week, and in fact, I will have another conversation with them on Monday morning. So next week, I'll have better information for you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. Are there any other questions thus far from committee members? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the functional area overviews. And I believe the process you wanted to go through is we'll just touch on each of these areas. Will you speak to them, or you want me to just ask if there are questions?
I'd be happy to answer any questions, but the budget committee chair, you can lead everyone through each functional area.
Yep, so what Jack was suggesting to me earlier is that we would check to see if there are any questions from committee members per functional area, and then see if there are any questions from the public as well per functional area. And just for the members of our community who are either attending here in the building in person or who may be watching us via Zoom and YouTube, this budget committee had 2 prior meetings to go over the proposed budget. So we've been through more detailed presentations on each of these functional areas. So tonight, it's just a matter of capturing any of those last questions, and then later in tonight's meeting, having the full public hearing and working towards a motion to adopt the proposed budget. So first up for functional areas is general government. Are there any questions from committee members?
I'd just like to make a comment. I appreciate this slide because it defines what direct services and support services are. And so it helps me to be able to process what exactly we're talking about versus me hoping that I understand the differentiation between those two. So that was really good. So thanks for this.
Okay. Jennifer or Karen, do you have any questions on general government? I see you're both still muted, so I assume not, but I'm just trying to be careful.
We're good. I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Moss, is there a way for us to see if any members of our public have questions on general government?
Yes, there is. In anyone viewing us on Zoom, you can use the raise your hand function if you have any questions on this topic. I'll give you just a moment to see if you do.
How many Zoom attendees do we have?
We are up to 26 now. And I do not, oh, we have one. All right, we have one, Mr. Said, so I will allow him to ask. All right, Mr. Said, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I just want to thank Chair Harrington for her leadership. And this is the first time in my 20 years in Washington County that we are included. Thank you, Chair Harrington and your team for a great positive leadership. As a member of the Coalition of Community of Colors, we are glad to be partners with Washington County.
Thank you very much, Mr. Said. Appreciate it. All righty. Seeing no other questions on general government, we'll move on to the next slide, public safety and justice. Are there any questions from the committee members on the detail of public safety and justice? You might recall this includes the sheriff, law enforcement, the jail, community corrections, and juvenile justice. And the district attorney's office, sorry. Without that, we don't have a complete public safety system. Seeing no questions from the committee here in the room, seeing none from our electronic video attendees, I'll check in with Mr. Moss. Do we have any?
Anyone online, do you have any questions? Seeing none, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you. We'll move on. Next slide, please, to land use and transportation. We had an extensive presentation from our Land Use and Transportation Director, Stephen Roberts, on this. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, do we have any from our?
Anyone on Zoom, any questions? No, Madam Chair.
Okay. And I assume if there's somebody in the room, you'll wave at me or something. Okay, then we'll move on to housing and health and human services. Are there any questions from committee members? Seeing none. Mr. Moss.
Anyone on Zoom, do you have any questions on health, housing, and human services? Seeing none, Madam Chair.
Next, we'll move on to the category of culture, education, and recreation. Do any committee members have any questions? Seeing none from our committee members on video, Mr. Moss.
Anyone on Zoom, do you have any questions for this cultural, education, and recreation? We do not, Madam Chair.
Okay, next slide, please. Non-departmental. Are there any committee questions on the non-departmental aspect of the budget?
I actually do have a question, Chair.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Burkhardt.
So I was just curious of where we fund any supplemental requests that come outside of the budget. So is that in non-departmental?
Can you clarify your question? When you talk about supplemental budget, are you talking about?
Any supplemental budget, so any extra that will happen after it's adopted, where do those dollars normally, come from, what fund? And I was asking, does that come from the non-departmental?
No, non-departmental is actually a functional area that includes a couple different org units. So each supplemental budget includes whether it's related with additional resources or additional appropriation from contingencies. They will be specific to each org unit. So they're not necessarily only in non-departmental, but they definitely can be in non-departmental as one org unit.
And I'll add to this, if you don't mind. This is Cia Lindstrom from County Administrator's Office. It does depend, as Jack was saying, it depends on the org unit. So if it's a special fund, they often have contingency, and they would need to come to the board for approval for the extra dollars to move out of contingency to actually appropriate those. If it's a general fund program, it would be asking for authorization for additional general fund. So I think that gets at your question.
Yes,
These are
it
for
does.
Yeah, larger amounts of money that can't be absorbed within current budget appropriations.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions from committee members? Mr. Moss, any from the public?
Members of the public, do you have any questions on the non-departmental fund? Seeing none, Madam Chair.
All right, moving on to facilities and technology capital budget. Any questions from committee members? Seeing none, Mr. Moss, could you check for the public?
Yes, I can. Members of the public, do you have any questions relating to facilities, technology, capital expenditures? Seeing none, Madam Chair.
All righty, we'll move on then to transportation capital. Are there any questions from committee members on the proposed investments for transportation capital?
Yes, I've asked this question, but I'd like, for the record, I'd like Jack or Stephen to just respond to why it would show that we have $43 million less MSTIP money. We really don't, but it's a timing of projects. And I'd just like Stephen to come on the record and explain that, so we don't think we are getting $43 million less dollars from the MSTIP program.
All right, Commissioner Willie. Stephen Roberts, Director of Land Use and Transportation. Yes, that's correct. So the variation in the budget from year to year is really a function of project expenditures. So various projects are at various stages in the project delivery process. We sometimes receive additional outside revenues from other agencies that where we incorporate work for them into our projects. So we have less of that revenue coming in this year. We have more expenditures going out. So it appears that there is sort of a decline in the MSTIP line item.
And I think in our conversation, I'm trying to flip back to that page, you said generally MSTIP revenues annually are about 34 million. Am I remembering that number correctly?
Correct. The general fund transfer is a fixed 34.6 million each year. Correct.
All right. Thank you very much, Stephen.
Thank you. Yeah, and that, thank you, Ruth. She was pointing out that was pages 241 and 242 in the budget book. Thank you.
Any other questions from committee members? Mr. Moss?
Is anyone on Zoom? Do you have any questions on transportation capital? Seeing none, Madam Chair.
We're moving on now to non-operating. Are there any questions about the non-operating budget from the committee members? Commissioner Willie?
Yes, in this non-operating area right here is included, of course, the lottery program dollars budgeted at $2.6 million. I've had conversations with Jack and Sia on this. We anticipate that number is going to shrink when we get to our September conversation. But in the allocation of those dollars, I see it just appears that there's redundancy in some of those amounts that we give to these organizations. I've talked to Sia about the importance of having these organizations come to us annually and kind of give us an update on what our money invested in their organizations is doing. And with that, I note that the Chambers of Commerce, there are 10 chambers in Washington County. We've only budgeted $2,000 for that entire group, $200 apiece. I don't know how long it's been like that, but I think it's been a considerable amount of time. And our chambers are suffering through this COVID thing just like all the rest, except they don't have the opportunity to seek any federal or state funding for their organization. So every one of them are, let's just say, operating on a much smaller, thin line. And so I'd like to propose that we change that to a $5,000 budget. That's $500 per chamber. And I've been assured that that $3,000 will be adjusted somewhere on that same page. But that's what I'd like to propose that.
And if I could chime in, I think we could probably handle this administratively, if that's acceptable to you all. We do have some shifts in this budget that are going to have to happen. As Commissioner Willie mentioned, this is one that's going to be pretty drastically impacted by COVID, so we're going to be reworking this budget anyway. We already have some changes just because the fair is not happening and some other things. So I think we can handle the piece about making sure that the chambers receive an increase. We can handle that administratively.
Well, I don't think it should just be handled administratively. I think the board needs to have the opportunity to discuss the lottery investments. I also wouldn't want to have a incomplete amendment proposed, that it'll come out of somewhere isn't actually a budget amendment. What we do have to make sure as part of the proposed budget that we have something that we're basing our investments on. So are you saying that we have this for now and we'll come back to it in a supplemental session, or that we'll have board discussion on it before we finalize our budget decision on June 16th?
So we could do one of two things. You all could go ahead and give us direction to change this, increase this line item now, if you'd like us to, and I'm looking to Jack.
I would love to provide some clarifications. So Commissioner Willie's proposal is, what Sia is explaining is actually administrative transactional level. It does not change the total appropriation of the budget. So we can definitely include changes depending on board direction to the chart, but the chart included in the budget document is merely a supporting schedule, which definitely supports the appropriation. But from Commissioner Willie's comment, it doesn't sound like that. He's proposing to change the total appropriation. Hence, it doesn't necessarily require committee actions to change anything in the budget adoption.
Thank you. But unfortunately, the budget is currently the only process that we board members have to count on for any sort of expenditures. So if you're suggesting we do it through some other outside means, I just want to see that be defined, as opposed to it happens sometime behind the curtain somewhere.
This can absolutely be.
Try to get at.
So I think.
So if I can do this in a motion, I would move that we increase the Chamber of Commerce allocation from $2,000 to $5,000, and we take that $3,000 out of the miscellaneous expenses for community events at the bottom line, which is currently $91.55. So that would increase the Chamber's allocation to $5,000 and the miscellaneous expenses to $61.55.
We can do that.
Thank you. That's a nice, clear amendment.
5,000 per chamber, right?
No.
Nice try on that, Commissioner.
I'll second the motion.
Yeah, as long as it is 5,000. 5,000.
It's 5,000 for all 10 chambers. It's $500 per chamber.
per chamber. You're not buying a membership. You're
I
just
like the
distributing
5,000 per
cash.
chamber.
You've only been paying them $200 for
I know, I like
since
the
you
big
were a
number.
commissioner, so.
I like the bigger number.
So, okay, thank you, Dick, for that second.
So we have a amendment on the table with a motion and a second. All those in favor, please vote by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The amendment passes. So we were first on committee member questions. Do we have any other questions on this non-operating budget? Seeing no further questions, let's turn to the public first in the room. Mr. Eck, I'd like to recognize you. We need you to come up to the mic and articulate your question. This is for questions. We have public comment later.
Raymond Deck from CPO6. Just kind of a clarification question. Because of COVID-19, the group having to do with community engagement involvement is spending a lot of time with COVID-19. How does that play into the budget going forward in case we have to go that route next year? Does it stay in the same grouping or does it go to a different grouping?
So I think what you're asking about is an operational question
Right.
that I would have to turn to our county administrator to ask. I don't think it's a budget question.
So,
Well, it's part of the budget, but it would be within that budget, how do you distribute that money? Does it go from one pot to a different pot?
I can try to answer your question. So right now, the community engagement program rests in the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Office, Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement. And there are currently funds there to support the work of the CPOs. Is your question about whether, because they're going virtually, there will be different costs associated with it? Repeat your question for me.
I know the community engagement people are spending certain days a week in the involvement process. And then the rest of the time, they're spending a lot of time working on COVID-19.
Oh, I get it.
So it's fine now, but come and say we have to keep going on this next year. How does this money distribute for next year? Is there a portion that goes into a different budget for this for next year?
Okay.
Or I'm guessing it's not budgeted now because it was never on the table for this year.
So, yes, folks across the organization have actually been mobilized for our COVID response, as you can imagine. And dollars are being mobilized to pay for that time separately. So the CPO staff who were mobilized for COVID are now coming back into the office and will be fully supporting the CPO program this next year.
So you won't need them for COVID the next year at this point.
And if we do, the money will come from elsewhere to support that. Yeah,
So there is don't have to worry about any budget money.
correct. Not for the, yeah, it will not ding the CPO program in any way.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for asking your question. Are there any other members in the room who have a question on the non-operating budget? Mr. Moss, anyone on Zoom?
Anyone on Zoom, do you have a question on the non-operating budget? Seeing none, Madam Chair.
All righty. That's it for the Washington County budget. So we'll go. Okay, we have public testimony at 8:15, so we're going to move next to the service district for lighting budget.
Yep.
Well, should we just have her set up over here because we're going to need you probably for the hearing.
Good point.
And I'll be quick.
Hello, Gina.
Sheila Jambroni, Land Use and Transportation, good evening. SDL budget is fairly straightforward. We begin with a beginning fund balance of about 921 million.
Is your mic on? Yes.
It is?
Great, thanks.
Is that better?
Speak into it a little.
Yeah, we had to put it
Scooch
right in
forward.
front of us. You feel free
Okay.
to move the whole device, however it's comfortable for you.
Okay. Oh, that's much better. I can hear myself. Okay, the revenues that we add are from our assessment areas that we collect through the taxes at 2.1 million. Materials and supplies primarily are our utility costs, electricity, with some interfund expenditures, that's staff, archiving, recording fees. And then we have approximately a 4-month operating contingency at 905 to round out our expenditures of $3,099,911. And then the next slide. Just to round out from our previous presentations, we expect small growth in the district this year, approximately 1%. There is a multi-year LED conversion project underway. We've made quite a bit of progress. Last year, we were at 35%, so we've increased our LED lights by 29% this year. And then, as I said, it's multi-years, so we still have another 3 years to go. An average of 1,450 lights will be added each year for the next 3 years. And with that, it concludes my summary of SDL. Are there any questions?
And just a comment real briefly for any members of our community who are wondering what areas are included in the service district for lighting. In our budget meeting, what was the first one, the 12th, I think it was, May 12th?
SDL was included on the 14th, actually.
14th, thank you, Jack. It included a map, and the map illustrated that most of the largest aspect of this service district for lighting areas in the urban unincorporated areas. But there are some other areas in the county that also have street lights that are part of the service district for lighting. Yes. Do the committee members have any questions? Okay, is there anyone in the room? Nope. How about on Zoom? Any questions?
Does anyone on Zoom have anything for the service district for lighting number 1? Seeing none, Madam Chair.
All right, we have time certain for public testimony tonight, and since we're just a smidge ahead of schedule, we'll be taking an intermission and picking back up at 8:15 p.m. So, for those of you in the room, feel free to relax out on Zoom land, and we'll pick back up at 8:15. Thank you. Hello, KS, I can see you.
Hello. I'm sorry, I was 2 minutes late and I didn't get added to the panel section of Zoom, so I couldn't get to introduce myself, but I didn't
No
want to
worries.
disturb
When we
the proceedings.
reconvene, we'll do that, and then
Okay.
we can see if you have any questions.
Oh, I didn't, so
Oh,
thank you.
okay, all righty. So we'll gather folks up. Do we have Karen Bolin and Jennifer Burkhart back on Zoom yet?
Yes, they are on there, just muted their videos.
Yeah, I'm here. We're here.
Okay, terrific. All right, so we'll reconvene as the Washington County Budget Committee and Service District for Lighting Number 1 Budget Committee. Earlier in the meeting, another member of our Budget Committee, K.S. Venkatraman, participated on Zoom this whole time. And he says he didn't have any questions previously. I don't know if you want to say hello to your fellow committee members.
Thank you, Chair Harrington. My name is K.S. Venkatraman, and I am the Director for Artificial Intelligence Computing at NVIDIA Corporation and a resident of Hillsborough. I'm glad to be here.
Well, thank you for serving as a Budget Committee member. We appreciate that. So we've gone through the overview of the Washington County budget and its various functional areas, as well as the service district for lighting. And we checked to see if we had any questions from our committee members, answered those, as well as checking to see if we had any questions from the public on those different parts along the way. We are now at the time-certain public testimony section. We have one person who has signed up, and we also have written testimony that was provided as well. And I've managed to misplace it already. Oh, nope, I found it. So I would first like to call up Razia Roshan. Razia, there she is. To provide public testimony, and you have 3 minutes, or since you're representing Tualatin Valley Creates, your community-based organization, you have up to 10 minutes.
Well, I am not going to take too much of your time. I do want to say thank you, commissioners and chair and county staff, first and foremost for putting up with me, because I tend to be one of the squeakiest wheels in the room.
That's right.
So I'm here tonight to give a thank you to the county for the continuous support that you've offered us as an organization for many years. And then I also want to give you a very quick update on the way that our organization is responding to the community. So immediately at the launch of many stay-in-place orders, our arts-based and culture-based organizations, not only in Washington County, but across the state itself, we, Tualatin Valley Creates, has been working hand in hand with the Regional Arts and Culture Council, the Oregon Arts Commission, and maintaining open communication with the Americans for the Arts as well to capture data on that. We have transitioned, our programming includes professional development. We've transitioned our workshops into webinars. And then we've also launched almost on a weekly basis doing informational sessions. And this has been a way that we've connected these artists and arts organizations who are now responding in their own ways to the additional resources that they need, as simply as instructions on how to write a good proposal for these $500 relief grants that are coming out all over the place. We intend to be here for the reconstruction and reopening. I know that we've, for the last 2 months, and as you guys have talked about tonight, have all been in reaction mode. TVC is also looking towards the future, that we want to be here for our artists, arts organizations, and our community members as we start to look at reopening and what that looks like. We'll continue to alter our programming for our professional development. We will continue to connect those entities with other funding resources, and then we intend to maintain our presence as the comprehensive resource for a communication hub of an online arts and culture calendar, as well as a resources page for other professional development offered outside of Tualatin Valley Creates. So I just wanted to thank you all for your continued support, and then also to let you know that we're here now and we intend to be here in the future as well.
Thank you very much. Do we have anyone else in the room who wishes to provide public testimony this evening? Mr. Moss, could we see if there's anyone on Zoom?
Yes, we have Marcus Mundy on Zoom to talk. So, Marcus, can you hear us? Can you hear us, Marcus? You're muted there.
I'm a little slow on the uptake, but I think I'm unmuted now. Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. As Mr. Moss said, my name is Marcus Mundy from the Coalition of Communities of Color. I thank all 5 of you for your leadership and for forging ahead on our county's needs despite COVID. And I thank you for your continued support of the Washington County Racial Equity Collaborative that I'm in, that the coalition is in with four local partners. Particular congratulations to your brand new, just elected commissioner, Commissioner Rogers. I hope you enjoy being a commissioner.
Thank you.
I'm happy to be among you and your staff this evening. My comments tonight, despite all, will be mercifully brief. I'm here to once again support and perhaps respectfully demand the full approved budget for the Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer position and the staff, and the coalition supports its funding now versus delaying until February. I'm aware of staff recommendations, but I think it's critical that it be funded now. I'm fully aware that we're in the midst of COVID-19, and I still support the as approved positions and budget, in part because of the major themes that I heard and that Cia Lindstrom shared right at the outset of this meeting. Continuity of response and essential services. We've curiously learned that people of color occupy many of the low income but newly designated essential services in Washington County now. So that would be in keeping with that goal. Caution for the future. Washington County's future is diverse and changing right under our feet, right as we're living our lives. And so that too is part of one of the major themes. And the board's pre-pandemic priorities clearly state equity as one of the factors that the county is driving towards. So that's really about it. Finally, and on a personal note, I will say that as a Black man living in Washington County, I would underscore the absolute need for these positions to exist in full as we observe life. I'm kind of mumbling through it, but as we observe life on the national scene in Central Park, in Minneapolis, where principles of equity inclusion are not in operation, they are not followed, and they can lead to life-altering or life-ending actions. Equity vigilance matters, and your work and your funding this department is critical in seeing that all the residents of Washington County are treated and worked with in an equitable way. That's it. I thank you for your time and letting me share my thoughts on this matter from the coalition. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mundy. I will have a follow-up question on an item that he raised, but I think I should ask it after we've completed the public testimony. Is there anyone else on Zoom?
Any other members of the public on Zoom? Do you have any questions or comments for the Budget Committee? Seeing none, Madam Chair.
All right. So that will close the public testimony for this section of the budget. Excuse me, I forgot to note, I wanted to make sure I noted written testimony that we received. We received a letter from Tony Venzina and the entire 4D Recovery team. 4D Recovery is located right here in Hillsborough that provides services for those who are recovering and continue to recover from alcohol and substance use disorder, to provide them with the necessary support that they need. His letter is highlighting that the threats to Oregon's budget includes resources for the behavioral health program, and this letter is asking us to prioritize addiction and mental health funding as we move forward with our discussions with the state, as well as we continue on with our own service programming here in Washington County. And this letter is included in the public record for our Budget Committee meeting tonight. Is there anything anyone else wants to add with regard to that testimony? No? Okay. All right. So the question that I have after hearing the public testimony is following up on the Racial Equity Collaborative. That was one of the programs that the board in our current fiscal year, 1920, funded through the board priorities funding. If my recollection serves me right, it was a proposal for a 3-year racial equity collaborative to the tune of $250,000 a year, each year for 3 years in a row. We funded that program for 1 year. The proposed budget does not include a board priority fund this year because of the constraints, the resource constraints that we have for this budget year. So I just wanted to confirm that the proposed budget does not currently include a second year $250,000 allocation. Is that
Chair,
correct?
this is Cia Lindstrom. Yes, that is correct.
Okay. So if we wanted to make such a change to the proposed budget, we would have to not only propose that expenditure, but we would have to identify resources such as some contingency somewhere in order to fund that. Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay, next we'll move on for action for tonight's Budget Committee. In order for us to adopt the Washington County budget, we need to make sure to adopt the permanent property tax rate of $2.2484 for the public safety local option levy at the new tax rate of 42 cents per thousand.
Actually,
That's the existing tax rate. The
Oh,
new one
you're
doesn't kick
right.
in until
New one.
21, 22.
Sorry. Yes, I jumped the gun on that one. This is the last year of that levy tax rate. The library local option levy, what we also refer to as WCCLS sometimes, at 22 cents per thousand, and then our general obligation bond amount of $4,795,979. What are the wishes of the Budget Committee?
So moved, Madam Chair, for the recommended action.
Is there a second?
Second.
I'm happy to second.
Yes, thank you very much. All those, is there any discussion on the proposed motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Let's see, I forgot to see what the full attendance is.
Your motion would carry, Madam Chair, 8-0.
Thank you very much. All righty. Next, we'll move on to the Service District for Lighting Number 1 budget. Is there a motion to approve that budget as proposed?
I move
I
that.
so move.
Go ahead, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Jennifer, for the motion, Jennifer Burkhart, and Commissioner Dick Scouten for the second.
Thank you.
Any questions or discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously, 8-0. So then what happens with our two budgets that we just approved? Well, next, they advance from the Budget Committee to the full Board of Commissioners. On June 16th, at a Board of Commissioners meeting, we will then hold another public hearing, and that will start at 10 a.m., and it will be held here in this building and in this room, the Charles D. Cameron Public Services Auditorium at 155 North First Avenue in Hillsborough. It will also be a Zoom meeting as well, and public testimony is welcome there as well. So you can either be here in person or attend via Zoom and follow the advance notification if you have a wish to testify in that meeting, so that Kevin knows to, Mr. Moss, our clerk, knows to call on you. So before we finish, I would like to thank all of my colleagues for participating on the Budget Committee. It's a substantial budget. This is just the paper copy of the summary document. There are also the detail files and the program files. And I really appreciate that our three lay members, or members of our community, referred to as lay members as the Budget Committee, really appreciate your contributing your time and expertise in reviewing the budget and participating in the various budget committees with us and asking questions and learning together. Are there any other comments from?
I think the only other comment I'd make is I would look forward to some further discussion on the points that Mr. Mundy raised earlier in his testimony between now and June 16th.
All right, thank you. Seeing no other comments for this evening, we will hereby adjourn the Washington County Budget and Service District Lighting for Budget Number 1 Budget Committees. So thank you very much. Good night, everyone. Stay healthy.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
In Zoom land as opposed to TV land.